back in town. Doors is back in town. Alright. Little throwback classic for you kids. Okay. So we're going to start our new chapter today, and that is pre-Columbian America. So, pre-Columbian meaning pre-Columbus, right? Before Columbus and the explorers made their way to the Americas. All right, so we're going to take a look first here at a map, right? This is one of the areas that we're going to be focused on is Mesoamerica. And if you remember, right, Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, right? Mesoamerica will be the land between the two Americas, right? As you can see, here is South America on the bottom, and there is part of North America, right? So Mesoamerica in between the two Americas. All right, so where are we going to start off? Mesoamerica, located between North and South America. Like I just said, again, the land between two Americas, guarantee you that will be question, right, in the future. All right, so located between North and South America, Mexico, and Central America areas, that's really where we're going to talk about most of these people. We do go down into South America a little bit, and briefly also we'll take a look at North America, but we're more concerned about the civilizations that are developed in between the two Americas and Mesoamerica, the Central America, and Mexico. That's what we're concerned about. Say, people originally migrated from Asia to the land bridge, right? We know how that goes. They go across the bridge, and they trickle their way down, right? Some people settled up, north in the Canada area, right? That was like the Inuits, so we'll kind of talk about them later. Many of our Native Americans that we know, like the Iroquois and the Algonquian, will make their way towards, spread out through North America, the Pueblo Indians as well, or Pueblo Native Americans as well. And then you continue your way down to the Central Americans, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mayas, the South Americans as well. All right. So we'll kind of get to all that again. But how do our people get here? It's through the land bridge of Asia. Okay. Varied climates throughout the area. Mesoamerica in particular is going to be like dense forests, tropical rainforests. So a lot of these civilizations that you see, right, you could even look today where their major cities are kind of buried in forests now. And many people are going to settle by bodies of water, right? That's just what people do, especially early on, right? When they don't have a way to bring water to themselves, they need to settle near water. So, early people. More often than not, like we've learned this before, most of our early people will be farmers. Okay, what do the Mesoamericans farm? Well, they will farm beans, they will farm sweet potatoes, peppers, tomatoes, squash, and maize, right, which is corn. It's a little bit different, like sweet corn almost. So a lot of these goods that are being grown, these crops that are being grown, are not found anywhere else in the world but here in Mesoamerica. So that's why they become a very important trade partner to Europe, because Europe does not really have access to a lot of these vegetables, a lot of these crops. Okay, South America, same thing. They're going to grow maize. You'll see more cassava now, or yuca, right? If you know yuca, it's like a root. And very, very tasty, right? Almost tastes like a potato. They will domesticate llamas for wool, right? Another thing that we don't really find throughout the world. We haven't talked about llamas yet. I know we talked about in Africa, there was camels, right? In the Middle East, there was camels. In Europe, they're using horses. But llamas were not really found anywhere other than the Americas. So that's another export for the Americas. Okay. And finally, more food equals a larger population, right? If we have more food, we could feed more people. If we could feed more people, our population is going to grow. All right, so that's kind of where we're going to start out with the early people. How did we get to these giant civilizations? Just like this, right? Like in Europe, when the early civilizations kind of settled, they over time when they can grow more crops, the cities grow larger, and civilizations get larger. So our first civilization we are going to talk about is the Olmecs. Okay, as you can see, the Olmec is here in Central America, more in Mexico, but there's parts of it in Central America. The darker red right there shows you that is kind of the central location of the Olmecs. Again, making sense. They're right on the water. It is the earliest civilization in Mesoamerica, located in Mexico by the Gulf Coast. Right, here's our Gulf Coast. Like I wrote here, very little is actually known about the Olmecs. They weren't big on keeping a lot of their history written down. Obviously, again, you have to think that they're back during even like the prehistoric times, the Olmecs. So even when we learned about our certain civilizations in Europe, right, earlier civilizations, we didn't really have recorded history. We kind of had to base it off of, their art and, things that they produced as far as artifacts are concerned. Right, so very little known about the Olmec. What we know comes from small art, right? Usually when our early civilizations, if they don't have a language, they at least painted to describe what they were doing or what they saw. Obviously, there was some sort of a religion there. They have temple ruins that they found. And also, the one famous thing is, I don't know if you can see it, but it's under me, the giant heads that they had, right? There are 14 giant stone heads. And these are kind of a mystery as well. Are they kings? Are they gods? We're not really sure, but they are impressive. As you can see, there's a gentleman standing right next to it. It's about 6 foot, and you can see he's only about half the size of the stone head. So how they constructed these heads, how they moved these heads, makes you wonder, right? They will trade with many people throughout Mesoamerica. So that's kind of another way that we know about them, right? Their culture had spread. You can see Olmec artifacts kind of sprinkled throughout North and South America. So obviously that means that they had some sort of movement and trade. The Olmecs also, like I wrote here, created a calendar. They had carved hieroglyphics in stone. Again, it's very tough to translate it, but some of it has been translated. They are known as the mother culture of Mesoamerica because, again, most of these Mesoamerican communities or civilizations, like the ones we were going to talk about, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mayas, they all took traditions from the Olmecs and kind of made their own traditions. So the Olmecs are really the beginning. I guess you can compare them to like the Minoans, right? When we talked about the Minoans, they were the first people that came about in Greece, right? And the Greeks kind of based a lot of their culture off the Minoans and improved upon it. And the same thing here with the Olmecs, right? The Olmecs are going to be the first civilization, and there'll be a basis for the civilizations coming after them, right? So that will bring us to the Mayans, right? They are located from the Yucatan Peninsula, which is in Mexico, all the way through most of Central America. So a lot larger than the Olmecs. And the Mayan civilization will become very, very large over time. Okay, right? Early Mayans are scattered. They were not really a united civilization. They were all, the same group of people, same ethnicity, same culture, same heritage. But they weren't a united nation across Central America. Okay, so I wrote, early Mayans are scattered. They're basically city-states they run themselves independently. Okay, if you look at the next point, farmers will use deforestation as well as raised fields to produce massive amounts of maize, right? What they would do, if you could take a look at this picture right here, right, they would actually build some of their fields in on a lake or something like that, right, or on a water source, so that these plants would have natural irrigation. Okay, and deforestation would be the cutting down of trees, cutting down of a forest, the deforesting of a forest, right? And that will again create more fields. Larger fields will then allow us to grow more crops. Cities are formed, but none are united yet. Like I said, very similar culture and heritage, but they're not united under one leader yet. Okay, growth of the Mayan civilization. Okay, the cities would rule over surrounding people. Larger cities ruled over smaller cities. Okay, again, things that we've seen this before in Europe, right? In Europe, we had larger cities took over villages, and they kind of controlled what the villages did. Tikal and Calakmul were the two largest cities and actually remained in contact through trade. Okay, this is kind of the beginning of some sort of a unity between the Mayan. They don't ever really unite as one nation, but this is about as close as they'll get. The Mayan cities had their own rulers, and the rulers are usually male. Shouldn't really be much of a shock here. Again, remember, early civilizations usually found women as inferior. Other than the Egyptians, right, who had women leaders, many of the early civilizations, they didn't view women as equals. Nobles ran the government and the armies. Okay, so obviously the wealthy has a lot of power in here. They're the ones who are going to be providing the weaponry and the armies to their leaders, their rulers of their kingdom. Again, there will be fights for loyalty and things like that. Again, you could kind of compare it to feudalism, right? Scribes, painters, and sculptors are highly respected parts of society, right? So basically, if you were the son of a noble, or the son of a noble, you wanted one of those jobs, they kind of gave you one of those jobs. Most of the middle class was merchant, and again, the largest group of the population will be farmers, right? Most of the population was poor farmers. They grew, the Mayans will grow fruit trees, cotton, maize, beans, squash. Again, a lot of the similar things that were grown in Mesoamerica. Again, we're still in Mesoamerica, but grown by the earlier people. So again, you can kind of see the improvements and really why they became such an important trade partner with Europe, right? Okay, the culture of the Mayans. Okay, the Maya people, they were polytheistic. Again, they're just like our early on civilizations, right? They are polytheistic. They're farmers. Kind of not a rigid social structure, but a pretty structured social structure. Okay, where everyone kind of knew their place. So again, if you understood the way the Romans and the Greeks were, they're similar to them. The Egyptians as well, the early Indians, all of that, they all had a lot of similarities, right? Polytheistic. They even created the idea of spirit animals, right? That every human being had a spirit representation that was an animal of themselves. They built massive temples and a stone structure, pyramids as well. I know we watched early on in the year, we watched that episode of Expedition Unknown about discovering the Mayan civilization, and stelas are going to be like these large, almost like totem poles that show carvings of leaders and their spirit animals, and highly respected people of that community or of that city. They will develop a hieroglyphic system, right, to communicate, to write down their ideas. That's why the scribes became so important, right? That was a very honorable position. They wrote books about astronomy, rituals on bark paper, okay? So they began to kind of develop their own paper as well, right? Kind of like the Egyptians had papyrus, the Mayans will use bark, and that's when they start to record their history. So this is why we know more about the Mayans than we do about the Olmecs. The Olmecs didn't really have a way to record their history. Okay, and a little fun fact for you, did you know they used astronomy to predict ritual dates, creating a calendar of 365 days, and they even came up with the concept of zero. So that's pretty impressive. And finally, we'll talk about the decline of the Mayans. No one is really sure how the Mayans civilization declined. Some believe it was maybe a peasant rebellion. Some believe potential over-farming. The one thing that is still celebrated about the Mayans today, right? We still talk about how they quote unquote predicted the end of the world, right? With the Mayan calendar, because the Mayan calendar ended. But really, if you look into it, the Mayan calendar was meant to kind of repeat itself. And also a scribe is writing, in the early 600s, 700s, they're not going to continue to predict past over 1500 years, right? They kind of just ran out of time. Just like we ran out of time today. So, all right, kids, stay safe.